Iran, where for a third straight night, the United States and Iran did not exchange gunfire. The pause in fighting comes after nearly 2 straight weeks of U.S. strikes. But it wasn't a completely quiet weekend in the Middle East. Ukraine launched an attack on an Iranian ship in the Caspian Sea that killed 1 sailor. Iran says the attack cannot go unanswered. For more, let's bring in retired Air Force Brigadier General John Teichert. General Teichert, first of all, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Absolutely, Nick.
Talk to us about where things stand right now, because this is a shift with now Ukraine getting involved in the fighting.
Well, I think it is, and Zelensky is going to be meeting with President Trump this week, and I think he's doing a couple of things to ingratiate himself to the president. Number one, this strike against an Iranian asset in the Caspian Sea, and number two, very strong talks that Ukraine is going to start to co-produce drones with the United States, something they are ahead in, we are behind in, and both of those things would be significant for that relationship.
What do you make of the timing of Ukraine getting involved 1 day before President Zelensky is scheduled to meet face-to-face with President Trump?
All of those things, I think, are just negotiating positions for Zelensky. He really is hoping for continued U.S. support, both from intelligence and munitions and otherwise. And I think these type of gestures are things that Zelensky can use, again, to get in the good graces of President Trump.
Talk about a 180 in that relationship, right?
No, and I think just looking back from a year ago, that Ukraine was on the rocks in the mind of President Trump, but now I think they are gaining momentum. They're actually gaining ground in Ukraine against the Russians, and right now it's the Russian economy that is on the rocks, and I think President Trump is backing a winner, and that's Zelensky.
Gone from no cards to play to now actually holding court with the president. There's also another high-stakes meeting, Benjamin Netanyahu, also involved in the mix.
Absolutely, and I think tomorrow when the president meets with the prime minister, that it's an opportunity for both of them to take a step back and reassess what is our strategy in Iran? What are we trying to accomplish? How are we trying to accomplish it? And I don't think the last 4.5 months have achieved our strategic objectives, and now maybe a reset is in order.
What are you expecting to come from that meeting with President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu?
There has been a difference in targeting strategy from the beginning of this war. Israel has gone after more strategic targets, regime, internal security, and then been restrained from some of those energy and power plant strikes. And I hope that Netanyahu convinces President Trump that it's not about striking military targets like we've done successfully in the last 4.5 months, but striking at those more strategic targets that hit at the heart of the regime.
General Teichert, has the war been as unpopular in Israel as it is starting to become here in the United States?
I don't think so, because they're always under an existential threat. Now, Netanyahu has various polling on his performance, but in general, the Israelis understand they live in a very dangerous neighborhood, and Iran is an existential threat. Americans don't feel that way.
There's been a lot of conversation about the depletion of our munitions. In fact, Thomas Massie talked about Kentucky Republican Congress. Thomas Massie says that we've depleted our missile defenses and significantly weakened the United States, something the Trump administration staunchly denies. Let's listen to this soundbite and chat.
I want to be crystal clear. The U.S. military, and I've verified this every which way, has everything that it needs to conduct this campaign as effectively as it needs to be.
But even by late May, we knew it would take years to replenish the stocks of Tomahawks, the THAAD, and Patriot missiles used up in that point in the war. Do our troops really have everything they need to quickly win this war?
Nick, one of the primary responsibilities of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is to ensure that our global responsibilities are met with the resources we have. And from the very beginning, he should have been careful to make sure we don't overuse munitions in one theater to the detriment of the other. It seems like we have, and that's part of the reset of our strategy. We've struck a lot of targets, but what have we accomplished? And I hope with the dwindling stock of munitions now, we are more careful about the type of strikes we undertake.
And General Teichert, let's talk about these targets, because there's even conversation that we're running out of targets to strike.
We're running out of military targets, but military targets don't win the war. It's strategic targets. And I've said from the very beginning of this, Nick, that we need to take a look at what are the targets we can hit that actually have a direct mapping to the regime's strength or what they value most. Maybe Kharg Island, as an example, is one of those targets that we can start striking now that we've left off of the targeting list thus far.
General Teichert, I've got about a minute left, but let's talk about how this has escalated, because now we're talking about this entire peninsula being involved, right? Because we had we understood that we had the Strait of Hormuz in play, but now it looks like part of the Red Sea is in play also because of the fighting down there with Yemen.
Nick, I think the problem is that Iran especially only responds to strength, capability, will, and resolve. And anytime we try to find an off-ramp, they're enticed by our weakness. Now I think the Houthis are getting into the mix because of that weakness, and the only way we can regain the initiative is to be strong in our tactics and our strategy instead of trying to find an off-ramp.
Remember, the IRC saying that, hey, the United States has the watches, but we have the time.
That's exactly right. No, they are brilliant in running out the time unless they see us as strong and that they need to capitulate, not us.
General Tiger, so good to have you sitting here at the desk with us.
It's great to be here.
Thank you so
Nick.
much.